I'm Howard Hale, and thanks for joining me for today's edition of the Horseman's Corner. On the program today, Martin Black, first three segments of the program, one of the really great horsemen in the country, and then Maddie Butcher, who's put together the Best Horse Practices Summit, will be the person that's on the last segment of the show. So let's get right into today's program. Our guest on the program today is Martin Black. He's one of the foremost Western horsemen in the country. He's at Bruno, Idaho. That's south of, Boise, about an hour?
Correct.
Give me some of your history, will you? How you got to the point where you are now?
Well, I grew up on a ranch. My family's ranched in this area for 5 generations now, and mainly in the horses in the earlier generations. And when I was growing up, we raised our own horses and had quite a few different horses. Even growing up, we had, 50 or 75 horses, and I still have close to 80 horses now, counting brood mares and foals and saddle horses and everything. And I was always interested in horsemanship and bridle horses. It's kind of a traditional thing in this area, and starting colts. So in high school, and after I got out of high school, I worked to get around to some good horsemen, and started a lot of colts from the time I was in high school. And at one point, I was contract colt starting in my late 30s, early 40s, and doing about 500 head a year for some of those years. And anyway, I've just always kind of been a mad scientist when it comes to trying to figure out these horses, and in the early stages and in the more advanced stages. And I've showed horses and competed in rodeos from the time I was a kid, and kind of backing off of that a little bit just because I got too many irons in the fire right now. But I've always enjoyed doing that, and I would still like to do it if I get my life a little better organized and stay home a little more. Recent years, the last kind of 15, 20 years, sort of started doing clinics and traveling, so it makes it a little hard to stay home long enough to get any rides on anything and get them very broke. And these clinics have took me all over the world and kind of see things a little differently. You get to see a lot of different breeds of horses and different disciplines and whatnot, instead of just ranch horses and bridle horses and rodeo atmosphere. But exposed me to a lot of other things. I got into the race horses and the colt contract business, and I deal with quite a few dressage horses and different things with the clinics. And so that part is interesting, just kind of rounding my exposure to different disciplines and different horses and different ways of thinking.
You do any clinics at your home ranch?
Yeah, COVID, when it came on, I got kind of excited, and I thought maybe this is the thing that's going to keep me home more, because the last few years I wanted to get away from the traveling so much and stay home on the ranch and ride my own horses and spend more time with my grandkids and whatnot. And this has really been an opportunity. I think it's going to continue to be an opportunity to be able to check those boxes. And all my international clinics canceled this year, and I didn't bother booking any this year because of the uncertainty of the borders and everything. Yeah, I still base here on the ranch, and that's kind of where my heart's always been, and I've had to do other things to make a living, but I'd like to kind of get back and be more of a rancher and have people come to the ranch and share my knowledge with them, in this atmosphere here instead of in arenas across the country and whatnot.
What's some of your philosophy about working with the horse?
I guess I try to see things from their perspective. One of my mentors mentioned that to me years ago, and handling cattle. I mean, if you can really do that, you see things more from a prey animal's point of view instead of a predator's point of view, and it takes a different mindset to do that. But if you can see it from their perspective, it makes perfect sense why they do what they do, and it kind of gives us a better idea of how to influence, what they're doing and how they think and everything. So I use that same philosophy on cattle and horses, and Cattle are very much like horses in their decision making in a lot of ways, and they're obviously different by nature. But their mindset, I think, is for the most part is very much alike. So I enjoy the handling cattle and whatnot as much as the horses. It gives you a lot of time to exercise that mindset, that philosophy.
Do sometimes people not give these animals enough time to process what you're wanting them to do?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's more consideration than time. If you had more consideration or more of an idea of how they think, really you can move along a little faster. But sometimes you plant a seed there, and they got to get over the fear or the uncertainty before they can reason with things. They're very quick to react in a self-preservation mindset. That's what prey animals do. And we have a large frontal lobe, so it's easy for us to process thoughts and make decisions. And that's not how they operate. So they think different than we do. So if we give them a decision to make, it might take them longer to come back down to a point where they can process those thoughts. But if they're kind of operating there anyway, in other words, if you don't intimidate them, or you're very calculated on how you intimidate them. For example, if you want them to move, it might take a little intimidation, but if you have it set up right, they're going to move in the direction that you want to. In other words, if you want to engage their flight mode and you got the doors closed, there's only one way for them to go, they're going to go exactly where you want them to go. And it's just a different thought process, and if you understand that and how they think, well, it doesn't necessarily take more time. I can get more done starting colts just by working from where they're at than some people, but it's not necessarily taking more time. It's being more precise with what you're doing.
You and Dr. Steve Peters have worked together on a book and some videos called Evidence-Based Horsemanship. How'd you get tied up with him?
Well, he kind of picked me out of the lineup. He came to a colt starting demonstration I was doing. Done. He come over and wanted to talk to me, and at that moment, I was trying to watch. This friend of mine was doing a demonstration following me, and I kind of put him off. And he kept saying things that was kind of interesting about the horse's brain, and I could tell he kind of had some areas that I wanted to hear more about. So anyway, we went to dinner that night, and he asked me more questions. I had a lot of questions for him, and it just kind of went from there. We've kind of went into business together, and we worked together quite a bit. And he comes to the ranch and rides several times a year, and we get together and do some seminars and whatnot. And he's kind of strong in an area that I don't know much about. I don't have any medical background or science background or anything like that. And he kind of started riding late in life, and I'm kind of lacking in the educational part of it. He's lacking in the experience part of it, and that's what we share a lot with each other is our strong areas overlap into each other's weak areas. So makes a pretty good fit.
Yeah, you have a book out called Evidence-Based Horsemanship, as I understand it, in collaboration with Dr. Peters. What's your idea there? What's your thought process, or what are you trying to accomplish, I guess would be a better way of putting it?
Well, when Dr. Peters first got with me, there was, of course, the reason he picked me out of the lineup is I was doing a lot of the things that he was interested in seeing. I didn't know it at the time, but I was working with the chemistry in a horse more than anybody else he's seen. I mean, it's easy thing to explain is letting them lick their lips when they get the dopamine, or whatever endorphins, serotonin, they lick their lips, and I had used that. I knew there was a powerful tool there for horses to learn when they lick their lips. I didn't know the chemistry behind it, but I knew the action that the horse took. If they didn't lick their lips, they weren't relaxed. They didn't get into that mindset. But anyway, he explained the science behind that part to me, and I'd done a lot of research in that, working cattle and horses. And basically, it's getting the horse to seek the relief more so than yielding from pressure. And they got to relax to find that chemistry, those drugs. And he explained, how that works. the pressure off, but it's them actually getting the relief. I call it cocktails. If they do the right thing, they'll find that margarita on their own, and they I would almost say that they get addicted to it, where they really seek after it. And that's what I was experimenting with, is how often and how much I could get them to seek that chemical level that makes them feel good. And in doing that, they really get to looking for the relief, and instead of just trying to stay out of the way or give the pressure like I see a lot of horses. So it takes pressure for relief to be effective, but it takes relief for pressure to be effective. But it's how much the horse is looking for the relief, or how much he's actually looking back to try to get away from the pressure. There's a huge difference between that. Anyway, that's kind of where I was working from, and that's where he explained the science behind that, and it really made a lot more sense after that. It really helped to refine what I was doing. Instead of just kind of hitting the target somewhere, it was a lot easier to hit the bullseye.
Interesting stuff, Martin, but let's take a break and hear from the folks that make the program possible. But you folks stay with us. Going to have a lot more good information from Martin Black in just a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner.
We've produced over 2,500 podcasts during the past year, including the Harvest USA, Daily Ag Markets, the Horseman's Corner, and our fastest-growing podcast, the Cattleman's Corner. This record-setting growth in listenership and, more importantly, downloads means your message could reside permanently on people's computers and phones everywhere when you become a sponsor of these podcasts. Contact us at halemultimedia.com for more information on this opportunity. That's halemultimedia.com.
Well, we're back from our commercial break, getting the program paid for, but Martin Black really has some interesting information, and we're on the second segment of today's program, so let's hear more of what Martin has to say about working with horses. Yeah, it sounds like I have not read the book, but I'm going to have to get it and read it because it sounds really interesting, where you've put together that scientific background and all of your experience with starting colts. Makes for an interesting project, doesn't it?
Yeah. Actually, we got a DVD that I think is better than the book. I mean, some people like the book because they like to read the science, but there's some more information in the DVD than the book, because we've done it a few years later, and we had a little farther down the road and whatnot. But they're both good. Like I say, some people would rather read a book than to watch a video, but there's some science in the video that's not in the book. But
where are you going from here?
Well, with this COVID thing, it keeps me home more, and we're trying to, Dr. Peters and I, he just retired here not quite a year ago even. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how to get more of this on the internet, some kind of program to teach on the internet, which I can't even run my cell phone without getting bucked off and not knowing which way it went. And he's a little bit better, but basically we got some people that's directing us, but we just need to kind of explore how to get this information through the internet to people. And like I say, he's retired, so he has more time, and if I'm not traveling overseas and whatnot, and I'm home more, well, I'll have more time. So, it's kind of this COVID thing has turned everything upside down, so it's a different way of teaching, and it's a point in our life where we're ready to do some things different. So we're exploring that. But I think the internet's going to be the vehicle to get this to people.
How about the stockmanship? You doing any work there with the cattle as well as with the horses?
Most of the clinics I do, I would say probably at least 80, if not 90% of the clinics I do involve cattle. And there's quite a few things that I think people get from it. And part of it is the psychological part, to get the cow to do what you want them to do, is very much like the horse. A lot of these people, they might have one horse for 20 years, and then, they might experience another horse for another 20 years, but not everybody's like me and people that, ride a lot of horses or have rode a lot of horses, started a lot of colts, and like I tell them, you can have a conversation with a lot of different cattle, and it'll help you learn to have a better conversation with your horse if you can learn to see it the way I see it, from their perspective. And you can't force a cow. She'll run back into the herd for safety, and just like you can't force a horse, or they'll engage their flight mode and they run off or buck or whatever they're going to do. So to keep that cow in a good mindset, to get her to take 10 steps and stop and turn to her right or turn to her left, a lot of people say, oh, you can't get a cow to do that. And I get my students to do that in clinics once they understand how to have the conversation with the cow. But it takes a lot of good horsemanship to be able to position your horse in the right place to get the cow to do what you want. So I use the cattle for a lot of different things. One, they gotta have a lot of things working with their horse. And it's not that they got to be a good horseman or have a good horse. They just have to have a better understanding how to position their horse, how to place his feet, how to point his head, things like that, because the cow is looking at that horse. He's not necessarily looking at you. He's not looking to see where your eyes look. He's looking to see where the horse's head is pointed and how much energy the horse has in his feet. And if we can control that or influence that in our horse, we have a better chance to influence the cow to do what we want. The cattle, just on the horsemanship side of things, is a huge tool for people. But people that handle cattle, I don't do many stock handling clinics per se. Like a lot of these other clinicians, they're doing stock handling clinics in a corral on foot, and they're doing a lot of good things. I grew up working cattle, from a horse. We didn't have corrals. We worked everything outside in the open range, and so these skills are very traditional in this area, and I like to kind of preserve the road deer concept and how to work cattle outside, and so I'm kind of promoting that at the same time. But other people find it very interesting too, that just be able to work cattle like that and engage them with their horse.
A lot of hooping and hollering around the cattle doesn't do much good, does it?
Well, in certain instances, that might be the right answer, but the way people do it, most incidents, it's not very successful, no.
What about differences in breeds of horses? Have you noticed much difference in the way they think, or is it a horse is a horse?
To the greater extent, a horse is a horse. I've worked a lot of thoroughbreds. I grew up on thoroughbreds. In the racehorse industry, they would say, well, you don't understand, these are thoroughbreds, because they thought my background was quarter horses. But they have their mindset of how to handle them. I mean, to make a long story shorter, I see a lot of hot-blooded quarter horses, the high-performance horses, and they can get in just as much trouble as the thoroughbreds. I've got thoroughbred stallions I've bred here for years, and they actually put a quieter disposition on the quarter horses, because the quarter horses I have come from the high-performance cutting bloodlines, basically, and some of the bloodlines in the thoroughbreds that I'm very familiar with, the Seattle Slews and Secretariat and some of those lines, and I'm talking fairly close, not 6 generations back, they're very quiet dispositions. And it's more about the horse personally. You can breed hot-blooded horses and everything. I've worked draft horses, and there's strains of hot draft horses. As a rule, they're quieter, but it's more about the experience the horses have and the way they're handled from the time they're young. Saying that there's Arabs and Pasafinos, and a lot of those they're more high energy. That's how they've been bred for thousands of years, not just hundreds of years or generations. They go back a long ways like that. Yeah, there's a difference with horses, but it's more. I see more of it because of the way the industry handles them, the different disciplines to handle them, and whether they're kept in stalls or whether they're out in a herd environment, that makes a huge difference. There's just a lot of things of the way they're handled and the way they're raised that makes more difference to what I see than the actual breed of the horse.
Well, Martin, this is another good time for us to take a break. Let's get that done and hear from the people that do make this program possible. And you folks, good to have you along with us, but stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more good information from Martin Black in just a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. If you miss Horseman's Corner on the radio, you can always find it by going to horsemanscorner.com. Going to find a lot more information there about horses, including horse sales, real estate, saddles, trailers. It's all there at horsemanscorner.com. And welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. We're on segment 3 of today's show, and really some interesting information from Martin Black, and he's going to have some information about Mustangs that's interesting, so let's get right to that. Have you done much work with wild horses?
Yeah, quite a bit.
And what do you find with those? Are the I know the Mustang is not a breed, it's actually a condition, because there are a lot of different gene pools in those Mustangs, but where they've been raised, how are they to work with?
Well, I think short and it's easy to offend people with the Mustangs because they have their opinion. But there is a lot of different breeds in the Mustang. But basically, the ones early on, the ones with the highest self-preservation are the ones that got away. I mean, these ranchers, my family included, they ran horses and they were contract horse gatherers too. My granddad done that a lot, and so they contracted and gathered horses for a lot of people. And this is before the BLM and the Mustang deal actually came along in the 60s. They were harvested and they were managed. After World War II, they weren't worth as much. Horses weren't worth as much, so horses just got left out. They wasn't worth gathering, and it wasn't that big a problem yet. But in the early 60s, when Wild Horse Annie come along and changed the thing, there's laws to protect them after that. And by the 70s, we had a problem because the people that was harvesting some of them, it was illegal, and so that stopped that. And the BLM didn't do anything for quite a few years, and they still don't do enough. The numbers are just keep growing, and I don't blame the BLM for that. It's the horse activists that are trying to protect them, and really there's more horses starving to death and thirsting to death in the summer now than ever, but they kind of hide that. They don't bring that to the table, but it's a fact. So they're not really helping the situation. But back to your question, because of all those circumstances, the easier horses to gather have been gathered, through the 50s and 60s, and even still to a point, you could say that's true, although the helicopter, not too many get away from the helicopter, and that's how they gather most all of them now. So they do have a strong preservation, and you could say the better ones, the cowboys, there for a period of time, they wanted the prettier ones, the smarter ones, and there's some truth to that, but from the 70s through the 80s and on, that isn't true, because the BLM just takes what they can. Basically, the other breeds, take a quarter horse or thoroughbred or any of them, they have selected horses for whatever performance that they're selecting them for. The Mustang really hasn't had any selection other than natural selection. So these other breeds have probably passed them up as much as anything. Now, there's still Mustangs that are good, hardy, tough horses, but for every one that makes it to the arena to do something, there's 10 that don't. And I'm just talking the ones that have been captured, because I know the way they operate, and they don't just take a gate cut and try to get rid of them. They turn some of them back out that aren't adoptable, and there's a feedlot right here in Bruno that feeds 3,000 head of horses that, go see in the pens there. They're not adopting them out of those pens. But there's a lot of political stuff going on there, and a lot of poor management. And again, I'm not blaming the BLM. Their hands are tied. There's lawsuits all the time on how they're doing things, and the public can't agree on it. So the Mustangs that I have had a personal experience with, I'd say for every one good one, there's 10 or 20 that are kind of mediocre, and probably that many more that are really, really tough to do anything with. I mean, cowboy might get along with them, but the general public can't. So they're not a breed that is going to fit anybody.
Kind of a sad situation, because some of those horses do wind up starving to death that shouldn't be starving to death.
It's pathetic. I mean, if you've been out on the range and seen some of the things that I see, and the BLM knows this. Again, I'm not blaming the BLM; their hands are tied. But anybody that's been out on the range, there's not enough water in certain areas. I'm not saying all of them, but in certain areas, and they just get really thin and they're dying. Anybody that would take any humane measures would be putting them down, but they can't do that. And in the winter, there's not enough feed for them in the lowland areas, and some of them are starving to death in the winter, and it's just really sad. I don't think anybody likes to see animals die of starvation or dehydration, but there's way too many Mustangs doing it.
You say you like working with the cows. Any particular events that you really like?
Done a little bit with the cutting, but mostly range cow horses and rodeo events, roping in the rodeos. When I was young, I rode saddle broncs a little bit, but I've done all the rodeo events other than bull riding and bareback, a little bit here and there, but team roping and we rope horses in this area, this small area here, as a rodeo event, and that's kind of a traditional thing in this area. But mainly cow horses and team roping.
Well, one thing that I didn't ask you, and I probably should have, and you can answer it if you want or not, are there any people that you really picked up a lot of knowledge from when you were that you worked with that you really thought influenced your horsemanship?
Oh, there's a pretty long list. Like I say, my family, grew up generations in horses, and my granddad, he was a very knowledgeable horseman, not so much in the sense of horse training like people would think, like Tom Dorrance or Ray Hunt or a good bridle horseman, but he really knew horses and, like handling wild horses and just getting by. And so a lot of the safety stuff, the basic stuff, and I was around him a lot growing up. So he was a huge influence to me. A lot of those first impressions came from him. His brother, Paul Black, was a top bridle horseman in northern Nevada, and in this area he managed different ranches in Nevada and had a lot of influence on a lot of young horsemen coming up, and he was really a finer part of the horsemanship. But there was, I got around Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt and Dean Lewis and quite a few other known horse people, but I just surrounded myself every chance I got with good bridle horsemen in northern Nevada, names that the local people would be familiar with, but the people on your program wouldn't know, but some of them were, I just always tried to get around these top hands and everything and work for room and board if that's what it took, or get a job, working on the ranch with them or neighboring them or anything I could to get around them. And so I've just always, and I still do. But the trouble is, all these old guys, they've all moved on, and it's hard to find many people like them around anymore. The kind of well-known names, I don't just mean younger trainers, but trainers my age. So many of them that are well-known it's a different deal showing horses, the way they train horses today than the way they used to make the bridle horses on the ranch. But there's still a handful of people I try to get around and compare notes with, some other clinicians that are friends of mine, and I do different things, some of these clinicians still. And I've always, from the time I was a kid, even today, I try to surround myself with people that are the better hands, and I think they might know something that I don't know. I like to surround myself with smarter people in the room. If I'm the smartest one in the room, well, I'm in trouble, I figure. So I like to be the dumber one in the room.
Outstanding horseman, Martin Black. It was good to have him with us on today's program, and really interesting how he's continuing to learn, realizes that he doesn't know it all yet and been at it for a long time. But it's a good place for a horseman to be, understanding that he doesn't know it all. Well, that concludes what we're doing with Martin Black, but we'll have Maddie Butcher with us in just a moment, and stay tuned for that. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. The Bunkhouse Trailer Sales has a large inventory of Big Bend trailers that handle the tough jobs like they should, with features that every cattleman can appreciate, but they're doing it from a new location that's at Steve's Truck and Equipment between Scottsbluff and Mitchell in the Nebraska Panhandle. If you can't stop by, give them a call at 308-623-9955 or check them out at bunkhousetrailersales.com. Bunkhousetrailersales.com for your next stock or horse trailer, including the tough, practical, cattleman-friendly Big Bend trailers. To find some really good businesses involved with agriculture, you can go to agsearch.us, horsemanscorner.com, or cattlemanscorner.com. A couple of good horse sales coming up that are listed on horsemanscorner.com. That's Gordon Livestock on September 19th. Starts at 9:30 in the morning with the loose horses and a lot of good riding horses on that sale. And then on the 20th, an internet-only sale of Blue Valentine Legacy Sale. Go to horsemanscorner.com for more information on those sales. Well, it is just about time to close out today's edition of the Horseman's Corner. Always great to have you folks along with us on the program, and as I've mentioned before, you can always catch it if you've missed it by going to horsemanscorner.com. So let's close out today's show. I'm Howard Hale, host of the program, and it's great to have you listeners along with us. So I'll say goodbye. May God bless. See you next week, same time, same place.